Hi, everyone. We are about to jump into a new presentation that I just put together. This is Plant Spirit Divination. So like I said, this is the practice run for this presentation. Actually put this together for upcoming event Austin Witchfest, which is in May. So just a couple weeks from now. Sorry, I've got some closed caption settings on here from my last presentation I'm trying to turn off. So yeah, like I said, this is a practice run. This presentation is called Plant Spirit Divination. It is based on some of the sections in the new book that I've been working on, the Poison Path Oracle, Divination, Spirit Communication, and Trance Work as the subtitle. So the Poison Path Oracle is all focused on different types of divinatory practice and incorporating a variety of plant spirits into those practices to enhance them. So that's what we'll be looking at today. Ancient oracles and plant spirits. So plants have played a key role in divination and spirit work throughout history, whether that is communication with the dead or communicating with various different deities through the use of different mind-altering plant allies as ritual fumigations or ceremonial beverages, uh, various different applications to create these altered states of consciousness. So because of that, many of these plants are central to the poison path and valued for their entheogenic uses. Entheogens are plants and fungi that alter consciousness, aiding in divine connection and spirit communication. So entheogen basically means to generate or to create the divine within. So that is connected to things like poetic inspiration, ecstatic trance, different things like that that are used in rituals, magic, and divination to bridge the physical and spiritual worlds. So a lot of the plants on the poison path are known for their entheogenic or psychoactive properties. However, I would say that all plants can be worked with in an entheogenic capacity. It's more about the context in which the plants are being used as opposed to a measurement of their chemical potency. So to work with the plant entheogenically doesn't necessarily mean that that plant has to be, a dangerous poison or a powerful psychoactive. There's many more subtle ways that plants can enhance and alter our consciousness. That when we begin to understand those different nuances, that we can choose specific plant allies for whether it's divination, ritual, spell work, choosing the particular plant allies that match those states of consciousness that are aligned with whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. There are many different potential uses for entheogens, whether it's enhancing intuition and psychic perception, helping us to tap into the subtle senses, to access deeper layers of consciousness where we can draw insights and information from, or tapping into even the collective unconsciousness through getting into these really deep meditative and trance states. People will work with entheogens to communicate with spirits or deities, connecting with the subconscious and hidden parts of the self. They can be employed for astral travel, spirit flight, or shamanic journeying, and can induce healing and prophetic dreams. They can be used for gathering information, insight, and instruction on a specific topic, and even inducing feelings of arousal and stimulation for ecstatic trance. They can also alternately induce states of deep relaxation, hypnosis, or sleep for inhibitory trance. So this is kind of where the different aspects of the plant's unique phytochemistry come in, depending if they're going to be more stimulating, aphrodisiac, or more relaxing, more sleep-inducing. Some of them we could even consider more mental stimulants or nootropics, things that help enhance memory, learning capability, even things like adaptogens that sort of enhance the cognitive process. All of those are different sort of facets of potential ways for working with plants in an entheogenic capacity, kind of choosing them based on the desired state of consciousness that we need. For example, if we were doing some kind of dream work or astral travel that requires us to go into a state of trance or a state of relaxation, we may not want to work with something that's going to be very arousing and stimulating, depending on our chosen method for entering into those states of consciousness. And of course, they can be incorporated into spell work. So getting into a ritual mindset or even a physiological state that kind of matches whatever the intention is of the ritual or spell that you're about to perform. So for example, like we know that burning herbs that are very martial, fiery, spicy, very like highly energetic herbs if we're doing, a really important protective ritual or something that might be seen as a little bit more aggressive, burning those herbs that have a more fiery nature, versus something that's going to be cooling and watery, because it matches with the intention of the ritual that we're doing. So if we look at different incense formulas, different ritual oil formulas, kind of drawing from not only the planetary and elemental correspondences of the herbs that are used in those formulas, we'll notice that on a physiological level as well, those ingredients, those herbal allies also kind of match the energy and the mindset necessary for that particular magical working. So when we think of plants and fungi in terms of being entheogenic, we think of those plants with powerful active constituents that may also be described as psychedelic, deliriant, or hallucinogenic. So those last three, those are all different things, sometimes used synonymously, but with varying levels of difference when it comes to the actual experience. However, it could be argued that the term entheogenic can be applied to the method and reason of use as much as it can be to the object of that use. All of nature is part of the divine, and if entheogenic implies this ability to awaken that divine connection, then technically all plants could be used in an entheogenic way. Powerful entheogens like henbane and datura alter brain chemistry in dramatic ways that affect consciousness. Passion flower, lavender, valerian, and hops also alter brain chemistry and create perceivable changes in perception, although more subtly than compared to plants like henbane and datura. But does that make them any less entheogenic? In my opinion, it does not. Looking to the plant spirits. So this is important to remember, especially when we start talking about entheogens and active constituents and phytochemistry, that we are working with the plant spirit just as much as we are with the physical compounds present in that plant material. Magical practitioners throughout history have been seen to work with a wide array of spirits, whether angels, demons, deities, fairies, or familiar spirits. Working with the spirit world for various ends is one of the key characteristics that all magical practitioners have in common. From an animistic worldview, all things have spirits. It is interesting that in Western esoteric traditions, since antiquity, plants have played an important role in occult practices. However, not much attention has been paid to the spirits that inhabit them. So we see a lot of recipes, a lot of plants being used as ingredients for various effects, but not really any deeper work with the plant spirits themselves. Plant spirit gnosis. So this is knowledge transmitted through interaction with plant spirits. Plant spirits are easier to connect with than other spirits that are disembodied, so more discorporeal, etheric type spirits, deities, spirits that don't have a physical body. Plant spirits are easier to connect with because of our ability to merge with them um, with our own physical bodies. And this is through ingestion. So whether via eating, drinking, smelling, smoking, or absorption through some other means, we have this ability and this affinity with our plant allies to physically become one with them. There are all of these ways that we can literally connect with these sentient beings on a physical and spiritual level. They elicit all sorts of physical responses when we come into contact with them, and it is through the physical stimuli that we are able to gain an intimate understanding of their spirits. So how does that come into play with divination? So when we think of plant divination, you might think of plucking the petals off of a daisy, or writing different outcomes, or even just yes and no on multiple different bay leaves, and burning the bay leaves and then observing how they burn, or floating plant material in a glass of water and kind of looking at that and interpreting its shapes. So a very kind of still grounded in the physical realm form of divination. A lot of like casting lots, or um, drawing oracle cards or tarot cards, actually using the physical material of the plant to perform divination by observing its behavior in some shape or form. And there's all different types of this sort of plant divination. But in this case, we're particularly talking about channeling plant spirits. Plant spirits are powerful consciousnesses that can be channeled for ritual or divination. So much in the same way that we would channel or connect with a specific deity or another patron spirit, merging with their personality and influence. So we can take on the qualities of those plant spirits as well, to kind of assist in our divinatory practice and the delivery of the message. We may choose a particular plant spirit for um, a specific scenario, so channeling the spirit of Rose if it is a divination involving love, or channeling the spirit of basil or patchouli if someone has a question about career or something money related. Or we may have plant spirits that we have a more familiar relationship with, that we work with on a more regular basis. And through them, we would channel them on a more regular basis for, any kind of scenario. So you may like to work with deadly nightshade, or you may like to work with henbane, or you may like to work with rose, and that's your plant ally of choice, the one that you have the most affinity with, the one that the communication is the clearest with, that you choose to incorporate into all of your workings or the majority of your workings. So more in a familiar spirit kind of a capacity in that sense. So with channeling plant spirits, this is very different from full-on possession. So you stay present and in control the entire time. So this is kind of like having a co-pilot. You're both present, you're both driving, you're both directing the process. You're just working together to get to the desired destination. So like I mentioned, you can work with a plant spirit familiar that you work with on a regular basis, or you can choose a plant spirit based on its specific traits and its sphere of influence. So building a relationship with plant spirits, so it's going to be much easier to connect with and get information from a plant spirit that you have an existing familiarity with. So just some tips on effective channeling. Start with spirits that you know, just simply because the familiarity makes making the connection easier. Learn their stories through folklore, medicine, and any form of existing lore out there. Different historical anecdotes that might involve that plant, various different religious stories in which that plant is um, symbolic for something in particular. So all of those are sort of hints as to what the characteristics and the sphere of influence that that plant spirit has actually are. So it's kind of like their biography that's been written through all of the various ways that humans have interacted with them over time. So once we really start to get a sense of not only their medicinal properties, but their history, their folklore, their magical correspondences, it makes connecting with the essence of their spirits that much easier. So it's like having the right phone number in your phone, making things more precise, that you're able to get a hold of them quickly, easily, and that the messages come through with clarity. So each plant has a very unique personality and history, and it's important that we get to know them. The process of channeling with a plant spirit: connect using a physical link. So this could be the living plant, it can be dried plant material, it can be a charm that contains some type of the plant. Working with the plant's flower essence, ritual oil, incense, anything that actually contains the plant. But we can also work with pictures of the plant. If you're an artist, you can draw pictures of them. That's a really powerful way to connect with, because you're engaging, like your creative mind and getting into a flow state while you're literally creating the image of what this plant looks like, which results in sort of a meditative state where you're able to connect with the plant spirit on a really deep level and bring in a lot of insight and intuition, sort of through that unconscious action of drawing or coloring or painting the image of the plant. While you're doing this, you can meditate on the plant's various traits. This could be its smell, its appearance, its feeling, um, how it physically feels or how it actually makes you feel if you're ingesting it in some way. And then hold all of these traits in your mind while you're reaching out in ritual. So, for example, and this goes for channeling any type of a spirit, one that we have some kind of familiarity and understanding with is a lot like trying to channel elemental energy. So, for example, channeling the energy of water, thinking about the ocean, rivers, rain, diving into a swimming pool, taking a relaxing bath, like all of those physical sensations, different sensory input that comes into play when we are interacting with that element, different memories that we may have, different scenarios that involve that element, all help to kind of gain an internal sense of the energy of that particular element. So when we're able to physically feel it and embody it, we're able to direct that energy into a specific purpose. And that is very similar for channeling plant spirits as well. So we're kind of building a symbolic and sensory vocabulary through all of the different things that we absorb that involve that particular plant spirit, whether it is growing it in the garden, encountering it in the wild, working with it in different formulas, drawing pictures of it, researching its history, learning about its medicinal properties. All of that is kind of feeding into the unconscious and building this vocabulary that gives us a sense for who and what that plant spirit is and what they represent and their unique type of energy. So all of those things are kind of what we're tapping into when we're making that initial connection and drawing that spirit and its energy into our bodies. Next, we'll talk about some different states of consciousness, some different types of divination, and various different plant allies that sort of support that. So a lot of divination has to do with the dream realm. So insights that are gained through our dreams while we're asleep. So there's different types of herbs that are associated with dreaming. There are those that actually make you fall asleep, and then there are those that enhance your dreams. So not every dream enhancing herb is going to be considered a sedative or a soporific, and not every sedative or soporific herb that induces sleep is necessarily going to enhance your ability to dream. So some examples of soporific or sleep-inducing herbs would be black henbane, cannabis. Cannabis is a really good example of an herb that will help you sleep, but it's not necessarily going to help you dream. And I know some people have different experiences, particularly with cannabis and its dream-inducing abilities. For me personally, any kind of cannabis use will completely like knock out my dream recall. I'm sure that I'm still dreaming, but I don't have any awareness or recollection of it. So for me, that is one that kind of stands in the way of having dreams come through with clarity and the ability to remember them. A lot of plants in the nightshade family, of course, known for their soporific or sleep-inducing effects. Deadly nightshade, mandrake, both known for being sedative, anesthetic, for sending you into, a really, really deep sleep known as a soporatum. The next one that I have is Malungu. This is a Brazilian tree. Erythrina malungu is its Latin name. This one is really good for anxiety, sleep, pain relief. It's actually got some opiate-like effects in its chemistry, so very, very euphoric, very relaxing, very sedative, that can be used to induce sleep. So if your issue with dream work is falling asleep, these herbs can kind of help you with that. And then, of course, opium poppy, and our last nightshade, thorn apple. So thorn apple being very associated with the moon, dream work, the psychic realm, any kind of nocturnal working, makes it a really powerful ally for dream divination. And then we have some dreaming herbs that will enhance dreaming, enhance dream recall, and help to promote sleep. And those are ashwagandha, which reduces cortisol levels and promotes REM sleep. This is the stage of sleep where dreaming actually occurs. So if you're waking up like multiple times throughout the night, you're maybe not getting into that deep REM sleep state where dreaming is happening. So working with ashwagandha can help with that. Another is California poppy. So this is to help induce relaxation and promote the quality of sleep. It is a member of the poppy family, but going to be a little bit different than opium poppy. And then we come to dream herb, Kalia Zakatechichi, which enhances dream recall and the vividness of dreams. So this one in particular is taken as a tea before sleep. It's a very bitter herb, which it kind of shares in common with some of the other bitter herbs in the Artemisia family that are known for their ability to help with dream recall, mugwort, wormwood, and it is kind of that bitterness that is part of the medicine that helps with this process. So all of these technically could be infused into a tea or taken, as a supplement in powder form. And then next we come to mugwort. Mugwort is probably one of the most popular herbs for dream work. It relaxes the body, but stimulates the dreaming mind. And I think that that's the case with a lot of these more bitter herbs, mugwort, wormwood, dream herb, is that it does induce this state of relaxation, but it leaves the mind a little bit more awake. So you're able to come out of a dream and remember it more easily because you're not in this like super, super deep sleep that you might have with some of the more sedative herbs. And then lastly, we have St. John's wort. This can increase dream frequency and vividness through its effects on the neurotransmitter serotonin. And so again, with all of these, they can be infused into a tea or taken as a supplement. It's just important that you're aware of any other medications that you might be taking or any interactions that may be present with some of these herbs. So definitely look into that before consuming any of them. While they're not necessarily poisonous or intensely psychoactive, there can always be the potential for interactions. So definitely being aware of kind of what's going on in your own body before you incorporate any of these. And then when it comes to divination itself, getting into sort of that state of mind to connect with intuition, to connect with the psychic abilities, there can be some roadblocks sometimes that get in the way of that, especially if we are doing divination for other people. So I've included a list of different herbs to kind of help with those things. The first one is anxiety. And we can think of anxiety as a kind of sixth sense in and of itself. So it's a means of self-preservation when the mind works through all of the potential eventualities of a situation before it happens. So in a way, anxiety is like a psychic perception because we've essentially worked through all of the different potential scenarios and seen what their outcomes could be. So with this, it's a matter of separating out, what are potential outcomes versus what is the most likely outcome. So anxiety can kind of cloud our clarity of vision when it comes to divination, especially when that relates to reading for other people and just feeling anxious and wanting to get the answer right, or give them, good advice. Sometimes that voice in your head kind of clouds things, and so quieting that anxiety can be really helpful before any kind of psychic working involving other people, or even if you're doing divination for yourself and you've got anxiety around the situation that you're doing divination for, working with some of these plant allies can help with that. So we've got passion flower. That's going to be really helpful for quieting that inner chatter. So any kind of repeating thought patterns, the voice in your head that just doesn't stop going. Passion flower will help to quiet that so that you can allow for things to come through via your intuition versus your sort of logical um, thinking, talking mind. Same thing with lavender. And then, of course, we've got valerian, hops, and cacao. So all of these could be taken as a tea. They could even be mixed together if you were wanting to create a blend for anti-anxiety, blending a variety of these different herbs together. And then we've also got cacao at the bottom. Cacao, I would probably just do by itself. I don't know how it would necessarily taste or blend with some of these other herbs. One plant that I do think goes well with cacao is Damiana. Damiana is also very relaxing and euphoric, so that may make a good anti-anxiety combination in addition to the cacao. But cacao in particular really helps with grounding yourself in your body and getting in touch with your heart and your emotions. It's just a very sort of comforting, warming, embracing plant ally to work with. So that can be really helpful for calming any sort of anxiety that you may have before a reading. Another thing that you could do is actually brew one of these herbs as a tea or prepare one of these beverages, if we're working with cacao, and actually share that with the person that you're doing the reading for, which kind of gives you a moment to relax and connect with the other person, sort of, quell any anxious energy that they may have brought into the reading as well, and then also to connect with these plant spirits. Self-confidence. So when it comes to offering psychic services to others, our desire to help and provide the correct information can make us question our own abilities, which impedes the process. So I find that sometimes being overly confident and just letting whatever comes to mind fall out of your mouth when you're doing a reading, a lot of times will give you the most accurate information. So when you're feeling like you are lacking in confidence and kind of questioning or over analyzing the things that are coming through, you can miss out on or unintentionally withhold important information. So some plant allies to help with that process that would encourage self-confidence are going to be Damiana, like I mentioned in the last slide, which is very relaxing and euphoric, but it's also got kind of a stimulating aphrodisiac energy. So it just makes you feel more open, more sociable. Again, this is going to be not something that I would consider dramatically psychoactive, but something that we can definitely work with in an entheogenic capacity to enter into these different states of consciousness that help support the working that we are about to perform. Of course, Blue Lotus. Blue Lotus has become very popular lately. Um, this one in general is really good for any kind of psychic development, um, anything within that realm. You know, it's very associated with the third eye because of the shape of the lotus and also its blue color. So it's already kind of got that psychic correspondence there. But when we look at its phytochemistry and its entheogenic effects, it's very relaxing, hypnotic, really helpful for any kind of meditation, trance work, connecting with intuition, because it just kind of helps you to let go and really settle into the process. So it opens you up to kind of be a vessel and a receptacle for that information to flow through. So that's a really powerful one to work with. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got coffee and black tea, which are, of course, going to be more stimulating unless you're drinking decaf. But with those, they help to sort of bring energy and bring movement, bringing that sort of chatty self-confidence that comes along with like sharing a cup of coffee with a friend at a coffee shop. You know, you're just sort of talking about um, all of life's adventures and things like that. So these can be really helpful to incorporate into readings for other people as well. And then, of course, we've got the tradition of tasseography, you know, reading the coffee grounds, reading the tea leaves at the bottom of the cup. So an additional kind of divinatory connection there with the coffee and the black tea. But I find that that little dose of caffeine can really be helpful for kind of breaking through that lack of self-confidence and getting the information flowing because it's literally, you know, stimulating the mind, speeding things up, making you more talkative. So that can be a really helpful one to incorporate as well. So we've talked about some different plant allies that we can actually consume to enhance dreaming, to help with anxiety, to help with self-confidence, to create these different states that we're trying to access in divination. But back to the channeling of a plant spirit or calling a plant spirit. I've got a little ritual here for calling upon a specific plant spirit for divination. So this could be either to channel the plant spirit, or it could be to use the plant spirit as a medium for scrying. So we'll just go right into that. So what you will need are 3 candles, the plant spirit glyph, which we'll talk more about what that is, the triangle of art, a vessel of water, and the plant material or a formula containing the plant material. So this could be flower essence, tincture, infused oil, etc. This is something that can be worked without the physical plant material because we are using the plant spirit glyphs as well as symbolic representations for the plant's particular energy. So if you're working with a plant that you don't have access to, a formula or physical plant material, that you can still perform this. So what is a plant spirit glyph? So a glyph is a symbolic representation of the plant spirit and all of its different energies, all of its different correspondences kind of channeled into one symbol. So these symbols serve as an access point that we're able to tap into those energies and incorporate them into spell work or to act as a means of connecting with that plant spirit. So this is kind of like the plant spirit's phone number. So a glyph is a symbolic key to a plant's occult or hidden forces. So it is, I don't call them sigils, even though I use a sigil making technique, um, because sigils are typically things that are destroyed after we make them. But with the plant spirit glyphs, the idea behind them is that their energy is more cumulative. So the more that we use them, the more that we connect with that energy, and the more that other practitioners work with them as well, the more that energy and that connection kind of builds over time. So it's created through a combination of spirit writing, sigil craft, and plant communication. So in this case, we're using a basic sigil making technique, which we'll go over in the next slide. Also kind of intuitively through partnership with the particular plant spirit, assembling the design and the overall image. And it's through communion with that plant spirit that we're able to channel all of that energy into these symbolic representations. So it's a very kind of meditative practice, very spiritual experience, kind of co-creating these glyphs with your plant allies. You can create your own. I've also got some existing ones out there. You'll see, for example, on the right-hand side is the plant spirit glyph for Venus flytrap. And you'll notice that with a lot of these too, they kind of wind up resembling different physical characteristics of the plants that they represent. So that's kind of interesting. So they can be incorporated into spell work and ritual to enhance the plant's power. So much in the same way that we would use runes or planetary glyphs or other occult symbols. Um, drawing them on the altar, drawing them on different magical objects, things like that, pretty much can be used the same way that we would use any other magical symbol to transfer that power onto whatever object the glyph is being drawn on. Like I mentioned, of course, you can create your own plant glyphs. This is a really great practice to kind of deepen your connection with a particular plant spirit. And the more that you use them, the more of a charge they build up, and the more that that association is kind of cemented together, makes it stronger. They can be used as a focus for trance work and summoning plant spirits. So by meditating on the image of the glyph and working through the process of channeling the spirit that we talked about in the beginning. So bringing to mind all of the different qualities that we associate with that plant spirit. They can be used as a means of summoning them into manifestation. Of course, other uses for glyphs, charging plant material, so strengthening that connection, marking different storage containers, or securing personal power symbols. So different plant allies that you have a personal and important connection to, using those to kind of reinforce that connection and that representation. So I've got like tattoos of my belladonna glyph, because that's my main plant spirit ally. So actually physically wearing that symbolic representation. So how to create them? It's very easy. Just choose a plant spirit ally. This is going to work the best with one that you're familiar with. So not just like looking up a random list of botanical names and picking a plant that you've never heard of or seen before. One that you're familiar with is going to be super helpful for this. Call upon the spirit before starting. Oops. It's optional to drink a tea made of the plant spirit or the plant material if it is safe to do so. My example is Atropa belladonna, so you're definitely not going to want to drink a tea of that. Um, you can burn it as an incense, apply oil. So it's some kind of physical connection to the plant spirit that you're working with. And then when it comes to creating the actual glyph, once you've made that connection to the spirit of the plant, is to take the Latin name. I've done this with the common names of plants too. Sometimes once you go through the process, you're not really left with enough material to make your glyph. So sometimes I'll take the Latin name and one of the common names. That way I have a few more letters and shapes to work with. So you could do it that way, or if you know of the name of the plant in any other language that you have a connection to that you feel is maybe like more representative of the plant spirit that you're working with, of course you can use those as well. It doesn't have to be the Latin name. That's just what I use for the majority of mine. So you would take that, as we see on the top right hand side, Atropa belladonna. And then you're going to go through and cross out all of the vowels and all of the repeating letters. So in this instance, we're left with the letter T, R, P, B, and D. So that is what we have to work with. And then I'll go through those and I'll basically use every shape once. So we've got a horizontal line from the letter T. Great. We've got a vertical line from the letter T. Great. So I'm going to kind of ignore the vertical line that occurs in literally all of these letters and just use the one, if that makes sense. So R has a vertical line, P has a vertical line. I'm just counting that as one single vertical line that I have to work with that represents all of those instead of having like 4 or 5 of them. And then I take the letter R. I've broken that down. So we see the little swoopy check mark looking shape. And then for the letter P, in this font, it looks like a kind of a weird half circle, basically just a circle for the upper part of the letter P, and then the 2 humps from the letter B and the 1 hump from the letter D. So those are all of the shapes that we have to work with to construct the physical body of the glyph or the symbol that we're using to represent the plant. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see the finished Atropa belladonna glyph, and you can find all of those different shapes within that. So we've got the vertical line running down the middle. We've got a little horizontal line up at the top. The circle, you notice I'll fill that in. We see the 2 humps from the letter B. That's basically been turned on its side, and I made them a little bit swoopier, a little bit more elegant and fancy looking. And then I added a couple little leaves to it. So you can stylize them to make them look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing or make them look a little bit more plant-like. It doesn't have to be exactly as those shapes are once we've broken them apart from their letters. But you can pick out all of those different shapes in there. So by breaking that down and recombining it together, we've created a symbolic representation for the Latin name Atropa belladonna. So the more times that we see that image and associate that with Atropa belladonna, the stronger that that connection is going to be. So that's essentially how we create the plant glyphs. And we'll be using those in the ritual to call upon the plant spirit. So that's why that's important. To charge the glyph, you can place it near the living plant. You can smoke it with incense made from dry plant material. You can anoint it with oil made from the plant that you're working with, or you can use a plant-based ink. Again, if you're not working with any kind of like physical material, if it's a very like rare or hard to find plant or one that you just, for whatever reason, aren't able to get your hands on any sort of formula containing, it's a totally okay. You can still make these without incorporating that physical materia. So as we're constructing our altar setup for the ritual, we're going to be using the triangle of art. So this is the Solomonic triangle of art, kind of adapted into a new form. So the triangle is typically the shape that I work with the most when it comes to any kind of summoning ritual where I'm calling something into manifestation. And that's because the triangle itself is the first of the sort of, I guess, three-dimensional forms. So we go from a single point, 2 points, which makes a line, and then 3 points makes the triangle. So it's like the first shape, I guess, put it that way. Um, So in this case, we are taking the triangle, downward pointing triangle, for calling into manifestation, and then taking 3 of the plant glyphs and placing those in each corner of the triangle. So you could print off copies, or if you wanted to draw them 3 times, depending on how you're constructing your triangle. One goes in each corner, and then there is a circle left in the middle. This is where we're going to put our vessel. So this could be a bowl of water. It could be a mason jar with water in it. Any kind of like glass container or glass vessel. It could be a chalice, um, dedicated plant spirit vessel. So we're working with water in this case because it's a spiritual conductor and represents that life-giving force. So it's going to be the manifestation point for the plant that we're working with. And we can work this ritual in a couple of different ways. We can do this as part of the plant spirit channeling, where we're actually calling the plant spirit into manifestation and into ourselves to channel the wisdom of the plant spirit through us as part of a divination practice, whether we're doing a reading for ourselves or other people. But we can also work this as a scrying ritual. So the vessel that you're putting inside the circle can be used as a scrying medium. So scrying into the actual liquid, or if we're working with like a jar or a glass orb, something that is filled with liquid that we can actually look through, and using that as a focal point for scrying. We can also do the plant spirit vessel. This is just a little bit more of an involved process of putting the plant itself into a container. So it's got various different parts of the plant's physical body. So roots, leaves, stems, flowers. We might incorporate like a tincture or an infusion of the actual plant that's been infused into a liquid and add that to the jar. So that essentially becomes a spirit vessel for the plant spirit itself. I've got one over here. I probably should put a picture. So this one is for Datura. I don't know how well you can see it. It's basically a big mason jar that's got all of the parts of the datura plant throughout its various stages of growth in alcohol. And it's also got datura tincture, um, some other datura formulas that I've added to it. So kind of a combining of all the things datura into one vessel. So that's the plant spirit vessel. So you would take the 3 candles and place those over the plant glyphs and put the vessel of water in the center. And then to begin the ritual, working with the plants of the poison path specifically, which is how I wrote this one, light the candles and say, I open the 3 ways and sit at the crossroads of the poison path. I open the way of Saturn. I open the way of Venus. I open the way of Mercury. Take your fingers and dip them in the water and flick the water into the 3 directions. So corresponding to the triangle. So we've got front left, front right, and then behind. And say, by the waters that sustain us and give us life, through our common bond, I call upon you, spirit of the poison garden. At this point, we would take some plant material or a formula that contains the plant material and add that to the water. Say, pass through the gates, Saturnian spirit. Pass through the gates, Venusian spirit. Pass through the gates, Mercurial spirit. Pass through the gates, Atropa belladonna, or the name of the plant spirit that you're calling in. So at this point, you would engage with the spirit, wait for signs of manifestation. You can use the water in the bowl or in the chalice or in the plant spirit vessel as a focal point for scrying, or sit in meditation and commune with the plant spirit in some different way. At this point, you would, lay any cards out that you might be working with, or whatever um, your modality of divination would be. Lay those out at that point, and that would serve as your means of communication with the particular plant spirit regarding whatever your inquiry is. So then we end the ritual, thank the plant spirit, extinguish the candles, and then you can pour the water outside or use it for later. So super simple. All right. It looks like we've come to the end of the slideshow. Let's see. Where are we at time-wise? It doesn't tell me. I didn't see it when I started. Awesome. So that was take 1 of plant spirit divination. Now I know what I need to tweak and to make more cohesive. So thank you for watching.